Hey, it's Henry here with the Single Dad Project podcast. I am shooting this video on December 24th, 2025. It is Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas to all you guys out there and the ladies too, if you happen to be watching. Um, I wanted to get on here real quick and let you guys know that the interview that we did with Jonny Andrews last week will be posted tomorrow, Christmas Day. It's an hour and a half interview. When Jonny and I met about 16 years ago, we did an interview back then. It ended up being four short videos, and I was trying to like find ways to edit them in, and it would have just taken me weeks to finagle everything in, and the conversation that Jonny and I had last week with what we talked about all those years ago. So I decided we're going to put these four videos behind me here talking now, so you'll see them in just a little bit. Two of the videos are what I call Jonny Andrews, the evolution of Jonny Andrews, because it's basically his rags to riches story. It's really remarkable, and it ties into a lot of what we were talking about last week, because in a way, during his divorce, he also went through a rags to riches episode, meaning he just let the money go and then built it back up. And I'm sure some of us out there want to know how he did that. So you want to pay attention for those interviews coming up in just a little bit here behind me, and then tomorrow. And then the other two set of videos that I have behind the evolution of Jonny Andrews is the mindset of Jonny Andrews. Now these are the titles that I gave the videos. It's not, this isn't how Jonny titled them. And the reason why I gave him those titles, it was because as we were doing this long interview 16 years ago, two things started to crystallize. One was his evolution, his rags to riches story, which is again remarkable. And the second thing, which I think is the most potent part of the interview, is Jonny's mindset. We were talking last week in the interview and happened to talk about mindset, and sometimes like guys like me, single dads out there, get kicked in the nuts, and we kind of revert back into the shithole that we're trying to dig ourselves out of. And the unique thing with Jonny and people of his caliber are that they get their nuts kicked too. And instead of reverting back into the shithole, they may revert back into the shithole, but quickly they get themselves out of it and start moving forward. So those two videos that are coming on the tail end here of me talking are really insightful. I was trying to find the right word. They're really insightful videos, and this is when Jonny was 30-ish years old, not married, no kids, nothing like that. And so to see him have that mindset and that tenacity to move forward, then all these years later he gets married, has kids, goes through a divorce, and then me and him are talking in the interview, and you still see that same tenacity and his mindset to move forward. So I wanted to give that to you guys here. The last thing I want to say is when we started this podcast in April, I had a little tagline that I came up with. I hardly ever use, but it's important because I want you to understand where I'm coming from with this dialogue and why the focus on single dads. So the basic little tagline I had was building your life building your life better one project at a time. Basically, it's something like that. I'm paraphrasing because I totally forgot what the damn tagline is now. But it's this idea that the projects that I talk about, and the projects being the spiritual project, the relational project, the intellectual project, the physical project, the financial project, and the business project, ultimately how I envision it is that each of these projects are stacking on themselves. And as you move from the spiritual project to the business project, hopefully you get to a point as a single dad where you do what Robert Kiyosaki talks about in the cash flow quadrant, which is you kind of move yourself from the employee box over to the business owner investor box where your money is ultimately doing the work for you. And the reason why I have this, I have envisioned this little idea of stacking projects from spiritual to business is to, when you get to that business project, hopefully you're at a point as a single dad where your money's working for you. So now you have time to do the things that are going to benefit you. And then you have the time for your kids to benefit them and ultimately do whatever you want to accomplish in the world. So that's the long form of what the Single Dad Project is all about. And so with that, I introduce you to Jonny Andrews from 16, 15 years ago, however long it was. Great interview. And then tomorrow you'll see the hour-and-a-half interview of me and him just hanging out and talking about what's going on today. And you'll see a lot of patterns, a lot of cycles, but very insightful. So with that, my name is Henry, and enjoy the show.
Music was like a huge part of my life. In fact, I got into business to fund my band. And in fourth grade, they didn't have, they had a bass for him, but they didn't have a bass for me. So I got to play a cello tuned like a bass, which made me super, super cool. I've now officially played with symphonies, youth symphonies, all sorts of different. I've played with some really famous jazz musicians. Carl Fontana, I believe, I can't remember where he came from. It might have been one of those Benny. I don't want to be wrong about this because someone's going to see that and go, "Oh my God, you don't remember?" I think it was the Benny Good. He came out of the Benny Goodman Orchestra or something like that. Old dude chewed gum while he played his trombone. It was the wackiest thing I'd ever seen. I'm serious. And I remember playing with him. Enrico Peranunzi and Roberto Gatto played on the stage at Big Mama's in Rome, Italy. That was cool as hell. But it was all about, I wanted to live that dream and kind of be that rock star. This was great. I got to hang out with a couple of my friends in Hanover, Germany, and I just played with a bunch of punk bands. Like total impromptu stuff. We just got out there and it was like dark, smoky clubs. And we were just rocking crazy, drunk music. It was so much fun. It was great. And then I just flew home from there. My last show was House of Blues, Chicago. It was fantastic. That was a pretty good show. Like even now when I put out products, I look at them as albums. I think more about what I'm doing in terms of like, what's this album gonna have? Like the tracks on the album. I listen to a specific kind of music when I do it because it all comes out of that. It's like, I really made this statement early on. It's like, if the concept isn't rock star enough for me, I don't want to do it because I still really think in terms of that. So yeah, when I first got out of college, I barely graduated, first of all. I was in like this huge, crazy depression thing. I hated it. I hated the school. I hated what I was doing. It just made no sense to me. And I kind of crashed out with, some friends of mine in Oregon. I was living in the Portland area and whatnot. And so I would go to interview after interview after interview. And I basically directionless, And so I remember very distinctly, I was sitting in my friend's living room in Portland. And I'm looking at the Wanans and I see this one. And I'm like, no. And so I'm like, hey, Allison, well, check this out. What do you think? And she's like, oh, you got to do that. You have to at least go to the interview. So I go to the interview, and I get in there, and this lady sits down. She's like, so, she's looking at my application. She's like, can you read? I'm like, mind? She says, no, English. I was like, oh, yeah, I got that down pretty well. What else do you need? She's like, well, what do you think makes you qualified for this position? I'd taken about, I'd almost gotten a minor in psychology. And so I just said, well, I've got all this psychology background. I'm pretty sure I can just sort of, whittle that stuff in there. She's like, good, go for it. I was like, all right, sweet. So I got the job. It was the first job I had after graduating college. I worked for the psychic hotline. It was awesome. And so I came up with this idea. I'm like, I'm an empathic reader. It was just essentially Freudian couch therapy. So tell me, what are your problems? And people say like love, money, jobs, money, love, weight loss, like the same things everyone has a problem with. And I got really good at talking to these folks and letting them work through their own problems. So she couldn't get pregnant and have kids. And so she says to me, do you think that the God that gave you your powers could give me a child? And I'm like, that's it, done. Took off the headphones, put them down, walked out, didn't even accept my first paycheck. I was like, that's it. And that's where I realized that people put a lot of their own personal value into these kinds of things, and it means something to them, when they make those phone calls. And like, even in my business today, it's like, I take it very seriously. I have a lot of fun doing it, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, people invest themselves into it, and so they expect to have the real thing given back to them. I've always been, I guess you could say, entrepreneurial. It really hit home that I was looking for something that could be a sales process that could be completely automated, and that decision began as sort of a kernel in the back of my mind when I was selling vacuum cleaners door to door. Nothing against the vacuums, man. I bought one myself. It was freaking fantastic. And I had this vacuum that I swear to God weighed like as much as 38 children all piled into a box. And I would have to carry this damn thing up and down stairs and give presentations to people who, at the end of the day, they just really wanted their rugs clean. They didn't want to buy an $1,800 vacuum cleaner. And that was, I lasted with that for about 6 days, because there was no pre-qualification process for these people. I was driving all over, and it was weird. I sold a bunch of them. I was actually good at it, but there was so much time-consuming tedium and so the return on investment of both my time and my energy was like in the red. I felt that there was a real negative, and that's when I stepped into the mortgage company, doing the whole mortgage industry, because there was a pre-qualification. We would actually run their credit and say, like, okay, this person looks like a good candidate for a loan. Let's go out there and talk to them. And that was a next step in the automation. Like, okay, how do we screen out the people who don't want, who don't qualify or don't want what we have? Then run the appointment, close the loan. It was cool. Problem with that, and the next advancement, I guess you could say, in my evolutionary process here, was that, I had to run the loans, had to process the loans, had to get them all filed, had to fight the lenders to get them closed. It was like one thing after another. So it was this massive pain in my ass, essentially. Ah, yes. The wonderful office. Yeah, it was one of those points in my life where I sort of made the decision early on that something needed to change, because I was like disturbingly depressed, ridiculously overweight, broke constantly. I was used to living off of like $4,000 a year. It was just stupid, and I wanted to make a change, and I didn't know what that was. It was I was pretty directionless as to where I was going to go, because it was while I was still in the mortgage industry. So there was I had no structure. It was just before like the real estate started to kind of this is not right. I have to go and seek out this life that I feel compelled to do. And I think that's actually one of the biggest reasons why there's so much like lunatic misery in the world and people are on so many antidepressants. Because like that spark of hope is gone. And so I went and, I did my 40 days in the wilderness, I guess you could say. It's like, I'm going to go and live in this office. I slept in a wicker chair for almost a year. I think it was almost a year of my life. And while I was there, I was trying to do loans as a loan officer, mortgage broker kind of guy. And I was also trying to do real estate investment with a group of friends I had. And what wound up happening was I had some sporadic successes, probably just because I was putting in so much time. And it was the worst thing ever. I was working constantly 7 days a week. Because my thought process was, okay, if I put myself into the worst situation I can think of, which is having no home and no nothing, that I'll be fueled somehow to like manifest this abundance all around me. And it didn't work out that way, even close. But the problem was I was sabotaging myself with a mindset. And anyway, long story short, right before one of my biggest successes, I was about to close a series of deals that would have set me up with a little over $5,000 a month passive cash flow. I mean, I was really like Carlton Sheets, doing the thing with the stuff and, no money down programs. It was pretty cool. Got a call from the underwriter, like, so dude, you don't qualify anymore. And that's exactly that's verbatim, by the way. They said, so dude, you no longer qualify anymore. Because that's how underwriters talk, those like mousy people. They're all like surfers at heart. And it turned out a dude had stolen my identity, bought a house, and was late on his payment. So that was showing up on my credit report overnight. Boom, gone. All my earnest money, all the properties I was going to close, like I was literally like, you're like reaching for it, and then like a cookie jar almost, and then your mom walks in and goes, back, not until after dinner. So I got smacked by the ruler, wiped out completely. I had to overdraw my bank account by like $200 and go crash at my folks' house. Just humiliating. I was there over Christmas, had no money to buy him gifts. And that was literally like the lowest point of my life, was Christmas morning sitting there on the couch, like watching them open stuff and know that I couldn't, I had no way to give him anything. And it was one of those things where like, oh yeah, hail the triumphant return of the entrepreneur. Dipshit. Go get a job, fool. I'm like, great. So I borrowed $500 from my folks and went back to Chicago. And essentially I was living in the house that my friends and I were rehabbing. And, just sort of paying them. What I found was that employers really look at credit history as kind of like whoa, look at you. You're a mess. Therefore, you'll be a bad employee. And so I had to get a job. And the only place that would take me didn't check credit. It was this staffing agent. It was a day labor agency. And what they wanted me to do was help create this skilled branch. Because they were doing a lot of money just with like day labor stuff. And so they're like, yeah, why don't we get some skilled people in here, like some engineers. And I was like, cool, all right, well, what the heck am I supposed to do? I heard, what? It was one of those typical scenarios in a job, and I think most people have these. You go in, and the management's like, well, here's what we want you to do. And we want you to do it 3 weeks ago, and we're not going to tell you really any more than this. And if you're not done by tomorrow, we're going to kill you and your entire family. So have fun. You want a burger? And I managed to make the guy, I believe it was like right around, it was like either $314,000 or $316,000 in my first 18 months there. I was there almost 2 years. And when it came time to pay me commission, what he did was he just said, hey, thanks for the money, fired me, did not pay me commission, and absorbed that company that I'd created back into the parent company. And that was really offensive in a lot of ways. And that was the last straw. I'm like, screw it, this is done. So, let's go internet. While I was working there, I sensed that the end was near. And I had created, with a partner of mine, a company exclusively online. And, we had investors, we had all sorts of stuff going into this thing. And it was the typical bottom-up mindset. And I was on the phone cold calling auto repair shops to try to get them to buy into this thing. It was a great idea. I mean, the public loved it. I got it in all sorts of news programs. The auto repair industry hated it. They really, really hated it. It was funny. Like, they lampooned me in all of the major newsprint publications for their industry. And it was just one thing after another. We ran out of money, and this is the moment that internet marketing happened. So the company that I was running online ran out of money. And so I had to ask a different question. Rather than what kind of ads can I buy that will generate consistent traffic and eyeballs, I'm like, oh crap, I can't buy anything. What can I do to get free traffic to this website? And that's when I started looking into stuff. And that's when I started discovering all of these weird internet marketing worlds out there. Search engine optimization, pay-per-click, article marketing. And that's what I started doing. I found the keywords in my marketplace, and within a couple of weeks of just consistently doing the same thing, boom, I'm top 10 Google. I was like, damn, this stuff actually works. One thing led me to another, and that's basically where I tripped into the internet. It was the next logical step in that process, because what I was able to do is create a site that would automate the marketing process as well as the delivery of the product. And the single task that I had to focus on was getting traffic to that website. And so now, rather than running around like a freaking headless chicken, I could do one thing. And it would sort of, I guess you could say, I would create this little animal, and I would feed it traffic, and it would poop out money. It was fantastic, and I really haven't looked back since. But that was, we're talking almost a decade of my life that I just sort of shrunk down to those couple of minutes. But it took a long time for me to understand that that's what I was looking for. All that kind of stuff kind of comes together and kind of makes you the person you are. And really, I guess you could say the rest is history. I just evolved from there. It's like, when did you finally make the decision to stop doing traditional business, or some sort of mental process? Because here's what I'm going to do. I want to talk about like how I was struggling with this shit, where I was like, why the hell And then I all of a sudden see these launches, these product launches in the internet marketing space where guys are making $18 million in some ridiculous sums of money in 24 hours. I'm like, what in the name of God are they doing that I'm not? Like, what is that they just did? That's the process I want to be using, you know?
So, go into that. Tell me more about that.
I will. It was one of those things where I realized that was not the path that I was meant to be taking, and this is one of those small lessons that I think we as human beings need to learn. I call it like, sort of the cosmic 2x4. It's like the cosmos was like, you're going the wrong way, dude. Seriously, no, stop, do something else. And then they start, it'll start incrementally increasing the suggestion that you not do what you're doing, and then eventually they just hey Charlie, I mean that 2x4, and just wham, you're done. Okay, you get it? And that's kind of what happened. And that's at that point there was a massive shift. I realized that I had been doing all of this because I was running from the inevitable. Because I've been living off of credit cards and other sorts of things, and loans, and using one thing to pay off another. So I was in a pretty big heap of debt. And what I always say is, I dug the hole, but Rodrigo pushed me in. that's my stolen self. And so, the night that I just accepted that and kind of said, okay, I'm screwed, and this is real. This is happening. I got the best sleep of my life. I slept like a freaking baby. It was like I just let it all go. It really comes down to belief system. First of all, if you have negative beliefs centered around money, for example, if you think that, if you make money, someone else is losing out, that's a scarcity mindset, and that's going to prevent you from doing what it takes to become successful in business. If, however, you have the mindset that there is as much money out there as anybody wants, and you look at it as, I'm going to create something that provides value to a specific group of dudes out there, that's more of an abundance mindset and a generosity mindset. And then it almost becomes a moral mission to let people know that you have this good stuff. So that's where it really needs to start, because it's funny, because every now and then I'll pop into the support desk and check out and see what's going on. And there's a lot of people out there that have a scarcity mindset, and that will screw you every time. And if you continue to have that mindset, you will fail universally. You could do it once, you could do it 1.5 billion times, and you will continue to fail, because with that mindset, you will sabotage your ability for success. And I used to have that. I used to believe, corporations were evil, no. Money was bad, money caused corruption and evil. No, it doesn't. Money probably solves more problems than it really causes. Very infrequently do you see completely broke people making a positive difference in the world. So the truth is, money has nothing to do with it. Corporations have nothing to do with it. They're both vacuous entities. It's what we as people, the life that we breathe into those things. If we as an individual, are good, then the actions that come from having money and using it appropriately are going to be good. So money is not evil, corporations are not evil, and justifying how we came to those beliefs is essentially lying to ourselves. And that's really what happens with the scarcity mindset, is we will justify ourselves in that, well, that's just how it is. And that's how we get that whole us versus them, like the rich versus the poor. And it's not true. It's simply not true. None of those stories are true. And they're just what we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better about an internal belief system that's essentially bullshit. And that's something I personally had to overcome. It was really more about having the drive to do it. To say, because I've gone through so many different failures in my life before I got it, that it was ridiculous. And so it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, wow. It's like getting punched in the freaking gut by Tyson or somebody like that. It's just, you watch your lungs fly out of your mouth and you're like, oh, that's gonna suck in the morning. And that's just really how it felt when like a business would go belly up. I'm like, shit. Here's another catastrophe I gotta dig myself out of. And it was just, okay, solve the problem, stop the bleeding, okay, move on to the next patient. What's next? And what I found and what I decided was, I'm like, I have never in my life been on that other side of the spectrum. I don't know. How can I judge that life if I've never lived it? So let's do it. Now, looking back, best decision I ever made. It's not about the money. No. It has nothing to do with the money. When I started, I thought it was, but then I made the money, and I realized it's about freedom. Because literally, right before we started doing this, I booked a plane ticket to Mexico. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. It's like, I'm gonna go hang out with other dudes that do what I do, in a mansion, on the water. Dude, never could do that before. It's like I can fly off and have, some Hawaiian vacation. I can do whatever I want. I can start a rock band. I can publish a book. Do I want to become a New York Times best-selling author? I know the people behind them now because I made the decision to fuel my life. If you don't put gas in your car, you're not driving. I don't care what kind of car you drive. It needs gas. And I don't care what kind of freedom you want. It needs money. The money is the fuel. That is it. That is it. When you fixate on the money, you're wrong. That's not what you need to fixate on. You have to fixate on the outcome you want. And I didn't understand that when I first got started. But I'm very happy that I have evolved into that kind of person, though. Mm-hmm. One of the most, and I hadn't really thought of it in terms of this, but one of the most important habits a person can have is to consistently get out of their comfort zone. And I try to do that every day. And some days it's easier than others, and whatnot. Because I'm not really, it's funny because I'm not good at getting out there and making friends. And so I built a business around getting out there and making friends. Because, when I was growing up from 4th grade on, being on stage terrified the hell out of me. So I became a performer. Why not? It's like, as a kid, I even wanted to do that. Because I knew that I would never be able to achieve anything if I allowed myself to live by fear. And all of a sudden then this thing called Mass Control comes out by this guy named Frank Kern. And I'm like, wow, son of a bitch. And it's just like, and it's everywhere I look. It's like bam, 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 bam. And then, he starts talking about these internet marketing launches that he did, like the biggest launches ever. Like, I don't remember what it was, like 23.4, 24.8, or 93 gazillion dollars in 14.8 seconds with a horse. And typically what happens, what you find is, the more you get yourself out there and just overcome whatever it is that you're dealing with, that's when it starts working. Like, it's usually that one thing that scares the hell out of you that you need to do that's going to separate you from what you want. And so I scraped together the only money I had, and I invested. I actually did. I invested in Mass Control. And Frank Kern, if you ever see this, I am one of the only people who completed the entire course. I didn't just complete it, I printed it out. But I'm not kidding. I decided that right then and there, I wanted what they were doing. I wanted to be that guy. That was exactly where I was going. Because all the other stuff that I was doing previous to that was cool. It was awesome, don't get me wrong. But I'm like, damn, that is the whole philosophy, concept, mindset, mechanics, flowing it all together. Totally want this. Very infrequently will you find somebody who wakes up one morning and is a millionaire because they bought something. It doesn't work that way. You have to do it. You have to do it consistently. And it's probably very simple, small, bite-sized steps. But people just stop, or they don't even bother to start, and that's where the problems happen. And so, my ability to manufacture my own success and my own income is based on one thing, and that's I implement. Constantly. And that's the big thing, is because so few people really do implement. Very few people do. It's really kind of unfortunate, because that's the thing that separates those who do from those who don't or won't, is the active implementation. And I'm just a guy. The only thing different about me is I said, this is what I want, I'm going to go there. Most people are like, well, I would like to do that, but I'm really scared that I'm gonna fail. Man, I screwed up so many websites when I first got started because I did not pay attention to what these guys were telling me. Like, oh yeah, I got that, no problem. Oh, this is totally great, awesome. And I look at it, it's like, oh my God. Like, there's these things, I go back and I look at these things, I'm like, did I really create that? No, that makes sense. I get it. Actually, no, I see what you're asking. You're asking about, like, okay, now that I've kind of like locked in on something that's working, where is it going from here? Well, the reality is that the evolution and process that got me to where I am now, I mean, it was sort of a rough and tumble kind of up and down sort of thing, and there's a lot of pain and suffering along the way because I had to change who I was inside of here and here before it would work. I've gotten to a level now, and this is one of those things where I have learned how to learn, and that's super vital. It's all about discovering for yourself how to solve problems. I got that. It's like, okay, let's look at things differently. When something's not working, how do you flip it around and be like, oh, I see how to fix that. It totally works now. So from here, it's literally just about building up the ninja skills, because I'm staying with this. This is like literally, this life is a no-brainer. Anybody that denies this is probably out of their freaking minds. It's what I call minimum movement, maximum impact. And it's a philosophy that now governs everything that I do. And it's all about, Bruce Lee, there were those rumors going around that, he would be like, "Wah," and he'd just flick his fingers, and all of a sudden the car behind you would explode. Like, that's all the power. It was just like this little movement that would transfer all of this energy into this massive result. And that's what I look for now. It's just a matter of, do you choose to become the person who can? And as soon as I saw what this stuff did, I'm like, hell yeah, I will. And that's what I've spent my time focused on.